We lived in a townhouse in the suburbs. Pretty safe area. There had been some robbers a couple blocks away, but they weren't common, and I felt pretty safe walking home alone at night. So one weekend, my boyfriend's brother, Marshall, and his girlfriend, Amy, and her brother, Curtis, were visiting. We were all going to chill and have a couple drinks, play video games, and relax. My boyfriend had his LSATs, and after months of hard studying, he wanted just to relax before the exam. Unfortunately, I ended up getting sick, and it was the worst flu that I'd ever had. Extremely high fever, 1 degree higher, and I would have had to go to the hospital. Nausea, headache, body aches, and all that good stuff. Of course, I didn't want that to stop my friends from having a good time, so they came over anyways, and I just stayed in my room. They went out to eat before they came over, so I was in bed alone watching TV. Felt like I was dying. I slept on and off. At 4 p.m. I heard a knock and my door open, and figured they were back. But when I called for my boyfriend, nobody came. Even if he was there, he probably wouldn't have heard me. But I knew he'd come check on me as soon as he came back, so I assumed I just heard something fall or the neighbors were making noises. So I just dismissed it and went back to sleep. I remember I was sleeping on my back, and in a deep sleep, I groggily opened my eyes and thought I saw a figure move across my room. I was so heavily medicated and sick I didn't even fully understand what had happened and what that meant. Like, I saw the figure, but it didn't connect in my brain that I may have seen someone, and since it was pretty dark in the room, I think part of me just thought it was the TV. Finally, at around 7 p.m., everybody came back. They were loud. Amy, my boyfriend brother's girlfriend, was very tipsy. She's very fun when drunk, so there was a lot of laughter. My boyfriend came in to check on me. He brought me soup. He sat and talked about his day as I ate it. I asked him to look in the basket under the bed to get a new bottle of aspirin. We had a full-size bed. It had one small basket underneath the bed where I kept extra pill bottles, toothbrushes, shaving cream, and stuff like that. I didn't know it right away, but thank goodness he looked under the bed. He put his head up and handed me the aspirin, but his facial expression had changed, like he lost all the color from his face. I didn't think much of it and said thank you. Come on, I'm going to take you to the bathroom, he stutters. I was kind of out of it, but I remember picking up on it. I told him no, I really didn't have to go, and I didn't feel like getting up. He said, no, let's go. I don't want to have to climb back up the stairs just because you need to go in 10 minutes. I remember feeling pretty hurt, but he knew he was right. I just had soup and half a bottle of water. He walked me downstairs, and I couldn't understand why we just didn't go to the bathroom upstairs. I was just too sick and felt too exhausted to question. He sat me down on the couch. What's going on? I practically whispered. This, I was told, although in my head, it sounded loud. He took out his phone, and his hand was shaking. I asked what was wrong, and I will never forget how my heart sunk and I felt like I couldn't breathe when he whispered, "There was someone under the bed." Amy laughed, and so I laughed, thinking it was a prank, but it felt serious. My boyfriend's brother suggested we get out of the house, so we did. As we were leaving, we heard a thud upstairs. We quickly left and drove away, then called the police. The police came and searched the house, but they didn't find anyone. He must have known we suspected he was there and left. My boyfriend couldn't give any description, only that he saw sneakers. But it was so dark he couldn't really see. Scariest thing that still leaves me on edge is that the police found a knife under the bed. It was a small steak knife, but very dull and rusty. There weren't any killings in the area, so my friends assumed he just wanted a place to sleep. I'm not sure how we got into our place, but I have some theories. I'm really proud of how my boyfriend handled everything. He's a calm, collect person, and I've always assumed he wouldn't be that way in a crisis. I just hope I never see this person again, ever. For the past 1 year and 9 months, I've been living alone and 9 hours away from my home due to my job. I'm not the most social person. My gym manager and a few stray cats aside, I haven't made any friends in this city. I'm generally fine being alone, but after almost 2 years of solitude, and with Ramadan approaching, a usually festive and family-oriented time in my country, even I began to feel a bit lonely. So yesterday afternoon, as I was about to get off work, I started to contemplate my dreadful return to the empty flat, and thought perhaps it wouldn't be a bad idea to get a flatmate, or move in with one. I had actually been thinking about this for a few weeks. I got my phone out, quickly found a few ads, and saved some numbers. Once home, I decided to call one that I had saved as Mehdi Rent. Mehdi was apparently the landlord's name. He was renting out the still available room in his 2-bedroom flat. He sounded like a decent guy over the phone, and we decided to meet up near the supermarket in a few minutes. As I couldn't figure out the exact location of the flat, still in my office attire, I headed out to meet him, and was in front of the supermarket 5 minutes later. Some 15 minutes went by, and there was still no sign of Mehdi. I called him to let him know I was there, and he confirmed that he was on his way. Soon afterwards, he showed up and greeted me with what seemed like excessive delight to me. The way you greet someone you actually know and haven't seen for a long while. He proceeded to take a small talk, and then casually asked a bunch of stuff I assumed any landlord might ask. I'm guessing you're not from town. Are you a student? What do you do? Where are you coming from? Stuff like that. I felt like he was being a bit overbearing, but I thought nothing of it. Several awkward responses later, I asked if we could go to see the flat. His smile changed into an inquisitive frown for the briefest moment before he resumed his exceedingly gleeful attitude and said, "Yes, of course." I started to walk behind him, and as we turned around the corner, he gestures to an old Renault 19. I had no idea he'd come by car, and had assumed we were walking to the flat, since it was supposed to be close to the supermarket, so I was surprised. I'm a ridiculously trusting person, and displeasing people is almost a phobia of mine. But I was hesitant to get into the car. It wasn't out of concern for my safety. I'm an idiot. I'm just from a really conservative society, and as a young woman, it would be really inappropriate to get into a car with some random dude I just met. Being a fellow member of said conservative society, I'm sure he knew this as well. He seemed to notice my discomfort at the suggestion, but asked me to get in anyways. Being generally unable to say no, I complied. As he drove, he attempted more small talk, but I was super uncomfortable and only responded with short interjections. I had my phone in my hand and got some notification, so the screen lit up. Just lit up with a small vibration, no sound. It was on silent. I didn't even check it, but along with my tacticum disposition, it seemed to have vexed him greatly. His weird upbeat attitude dissolved in a moment, and I was sternly ordered to put my phone on the back seat. At first, not knowing how to respond to this, I gave him an incredulous look. Seeing his lack of reaction to my disbelief, I thought maybe am I being rude? So I started to put it inside my handbag, but he was adamant. I put it in the back of the seat and repeated the oddly specific command. I'm somewhat alarmed by the unwarranted fervor at this point, and decided to keep my phone in my hand instead. So I timidly replied, "No, I'm fine," which wasn't enough to deter him. He brought out his own phone, turned it off, and turned to me to say, "See, now put yours on the back seat." I essentially ignored him because I didn't know what else to do or say. We had been driving for maybe 3 minutes, so I asked him if we're near the flat, and he said yes. Another 2 minutes or so went by. I'm starting to get really nervous, and I ask again and get the same response. Then I ask if the woman occupying the other room wouldn't mind a visit, which was probably a silly question, but I just wanted to find out whether she would be there, seeing as I wasn't keen on being alone with this guy in a flat. His facial expression morphed into the same inquisitive look he had assumed earlier, and he remained silent for a second before saying that she wouldn't mind. I thought nothing overly suspicious had happened so far, but I was getting overwhelmed by a terrible sense of dread for whatever reason. Something about this man just didn't feel right. This feeling was shortly confirmed when he caressed my hand. I got startled and instinctively flinched away, then finally mustered up enough courage to ask him to stop the car. Instead of stopping, he put a firm hand on my thigh and flatly told me to calm down. Further internal panic ensued, but I tried to keep my outward composure and asked him again to stop the car. I was ignored and he kept attempting to touch me. I was absolutely freaked out at this point and thinking I should just jump out of the car because who knows where this creep is taking me and what might happen to me. This was a car from the 80s and you had to lock/unlock the doors manually by pressing or pulling up that little thingy for which I don't know the English word. I looked at my door to check and it was unlocked. We were thankfully coming to an intersection with a stop sign where you'd have to slow down to almost a halt. So I thought this was my chance to get out. I'm still trying to get his hand off me as the car starts to slow down. Meanwhile, my phone starts vibrating in my hand, and I look down at the screen. Initially, I was confused and couldn't comprehend what I was looking at, but no words can describe the sheer terror that overcame me when I saw the caller's name, Mehdi Rent. For a fraction of a second, I was just paralyzed by the chilling realization that this guy was even more of a stranger than I'd thought, that he had likely realized at some point that I thought he was someone else, yet decided to pretend he's actually who I thought he was anyway, to keep me in his car. The car had slowed down considerably when I snapped out of my stupor, opened the door, and bolted out like a rocket. I started running out of sheer fear and shock, but slowed down to a walk when I looked back and saw that he didn't come out of the car. He had just completely stopped, stayed there for a while, then slowly drove away. I got back to the supermarket and met the real Mehdi. I had called my gym manager/friend meanwhile, and he waited for her to arrive. I wasn't going anywhere alone with anyone after that. We saw a flat, which turned out to be nearly in ruin, and nothing like the one in the picture. So I went home, still terrified and with no prospect of companionship. This just happened yesterday, so I'm still overcome with panic when I think about this guy and what he might have had in his mind. I think it's time for me to seriously learn to say no and just to generally stop being this dumb. A few years ago, I was leaving my grad school office late, around 10 p.m. to catch the bus home. I walked from the university campus via relatively busy, well-lit streets to the main north-south road in my area of the city. I was waiting for a bus at a shelter as it was the middle of the winter, snowing and a bit cold. The buses ran about every 15 minutes, so I wasn't worried or nervous, just patiently waiting to get home. I wasn't listening to my music, and I had my headphones in when I noticed a guy walk up to the shelter. I looked at him briefly, did that little Canadian half smile of acknowledgement, and went back to listening/reading Reddit. A few minutes passed and I could hear him start talking to me. Well, I assumed it was me. I was the only one around. I looked up and he was just staring at me, smiling a bit oddly and speaking to me. I took out my headphones and said, "Excuse me." He just kept smiling and blathering on, asking me about my day, the weather, what I like to do, etc. I don't know what it is about me, but I'm a people pleaser. I don't like confrontation, and my main aim in life is to keep the peace. So I answered a few of his questions politely and as non-specifically as I could. With one earbud still in my ear, he just kept blathering on, and I was sort of just nodding politely. This went on for about 10 minutes, and I just got this sinking feeling in my stomach about this guy, like something was just a little off, but enough to make me nervous. After about 10 minutes, I could see the bus rolling up, which was a huge relief for me. No one else had arrived at the bus stop, and I could see at least 10 to 15 people on the bus, which was great. I got on the bus and sat near the front, and the guy sat across from me so he could keep talking to me. I'd originally intended to head to my own house, but after this guy decided to get on my personal parrot, I decided to screw it. I'm going to my boyfriend's house instead. I was still getting an uncomfortable feeling from this guy, so I just decided I would push the bus stop button, a stop early, and see what the guy did. The bus came to a stop at my request, and the guy got up. I didn't move. "Isn't this your stop too?" he asked me, and I said, "Whoops, I must have hit the wrong stop." He looked at me and said, "Oh, that's funny, I mixed it up too. This isn't my stop either," and I sat back down. At this point, I'm pretty freaked out. I hit the bus stop for the next stop and texted my boyfriend to come and meet me at 109th Street. I got up to leave the bus once it stopped, and the creepy dude followed. I crossed the road and he followed, still talking away at me, still asking me questions. Once I got to the other side of the road, I told him that I had to go and my boyfriend was meeting me. He looked irritated at the idea of my boyfriend and tried to walk with me a bit more, but I stopped and told him that I was walking on alone. "Can I have your number?" he asked. I panicked. I just froze. I decided to give him almost my phone number. Just the last 4 digits were scrambled. I read it off to him, said goodnight, and started to walk away quickly. I made maybe 20 steps and I could hear someone jogging after me. "Hey," he yelled at me. I think there was a mix-up. I tried calling the number and it wasn't you. He jogged up level next to me and was still smiling. How weird," I said, grabbing my phone. I pretended to check it for a mixed call and quickly texted my boyfriend that I was terrified and needed to get here now. "So what's your real number then?" he asked. I honestly don't know what I would have done. I think I would have given him my real number. I just had no idea what to do. It was cold, it was winter, it was dark, in this little residential neighborhood I'd entered, and I knew I couldn't outrun him. Luckily for me, that was when my boyfriend came running up, and I turned to the guy and said, "Have a good night," and jogged up next to my boyfriend and just launched myself at him. I didn't look back at the creepy dude, but I did tell my boyfriend to please make sure all the doors were locked and all the windows too. So creepy dude, let's not meet. This happened a couple years ago. I was 17 at the time. My parents had gone away on a holiday out of the country and left me alone at our house. This was a pretty normal thing to happen as my parents went away and I live in a pretty safe area. So you can picture the story better, here's the layout of my house. Will be on the screen. But anyway, it was probably about 1 a.m. I tend to stay up watching films. Coincidentally, I had been watching a horror film when I heard the letterbox of the front door shut. At first I brushed it off as the wind because it would tend to do this. About 5 minutes later, the security light in the back garden came on, which my window of my bedroom is directly above, so I noticed it coming on. And I sat staring out of my window for a while, looking to see if the cat was walking through the garden, but nothing was there. I brushed it off and continued to watch my film. It must have been a good 20 minutes later. The film had ended, so I turned off my TV and got into bed. It wasn't until the house was silent that I could hear the back door handle jiggling about quietly. At this point, I was freaking out a bit, but I knew that I had locked the door, so I decided to creep downstairs and investigate. I got to the bottom of my stairs and the jiggling had stopped. I was walking down the hallway to go into my kitchen where the back door and the letterbox on the front door opened. I've never been so scared in my life. All I could see was a finger holding it open, and these crazy eyes staring directly at me. I didn't know what to do. I'd just frozen, and my heart was beating out of my chest. It felt like an eternity that he was staring at me, but then he just slowly closed the letterbox, and stood up and knocked on the door. I yelled at him, telling to leave, and that I had called the police, which I hadn't. That's when he started bashing on the door. It sounded like he had kicked it a couple times as well. But then it suddenly just stopped, like it was over. So the crazy man looking through my letterbox, let's not meet. One thing you have to know is that I keep a little bit of an odd sleep schedule. I work closings at a retail job, so I'm often getting home around 10:30 to 11 p.m. And after getting a few hours to wind down and relax, I'm often not in bed till after 2 or 3 a.m. Another thing is that despite of being a wuss, I often listen to Let's Not Meet story narrations on YouTube for background noise. A habit my husband insists is behind this story, though I know better. My apartment is ground floor 1, which is a complex. Means that as soon as you walk into the front door, there's mailboxes, then a small set of stairs to go down, and another to go up to the second floor. So it isn't unusual to hear noises of animals in the bushes right outside the windows, or little things like that. So as I was working on some free writing with one such video playing in the background, I wasn't fazed by hearing noises outside. At 1:45 a.m., I suddenly heard a tapping on my kitchen window. For a moment I thought it was the video, until I remembered I'd listened to this one before and it had no sound effects. So I paused the video and waited. Sure enough, about 5 minutes later there was more tapping, 5 taps in quick succession. Too precise sounding to be an animal outside, or bits from the tree behind the kitchen window in the street hitting the building. I waited a moment longer. This time it only took about a minute for whoever it was to start tapping again. 5 taps in quick succession, too precise to be anything but a person. I'd always been paranoid about going to shut a window, only to see someone has put up the blinds. So I decided the best course of action would be to wake up my husband. I hate to sound like a horror cliche, but I think there's someone outside tapping on the window, I remember saying. He went outside and looked around. He said he didn't see anyone and immediately claimed it was my imagination. I knew better and told him so, but he waved off my concerns and went back to bed. To calm myself down, I put a guilty pleasure show. All I will say is it once aired on Disney Channel and was meant for kid to tween age bracket, so I was rather campy and childish despite being set at high school, and went back to my writing. Another 10 minutes went by when the tapping started again. I paused my episode and listened. Almost 30 seconds later there were more tapping. Remembering one of the spooky story videos I listened to, I downloaded an app to my tablet meant to record sleep talking and set the tablet by the window with the app running. By then I was really thinking I should head to bed, so I made sure the windows and doors were locked. Before moving the still recording tablet to the bedroom windowsill and crawling into bed. Then I checked the tablet in the morning. Sure enough, there were several short sound clips throughout the rest of the night of 5 precise taps in quick succession. The last one happening at 3:15 in the morning. More to convince myself it was nothing than anything else. I went outside to take a look. In the dirt by each window, there were marks that indicated someone had been crouching down. Footprints that looked like knee impressions. I knew it couldn't be my husband because I had watched him from the window simply walk down the length of the wall outside with his flashlight. So to the strange person tapping on my window at 1 a.m., let's not meet.